Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the December 2022 Ordinary Council meeting. We acknowledge and pay our respects to the traditional custodians of this land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and their elders past and present. I would like to advise everyone that the audio of this meeting is being live streamed to YouTube, and I request everyone to please turn off your mobile phones. I remind you that any recording of the meeting proceedings and photography within the chamber is prohibited unless prior approval has been granted, and councillors and city officers are reminded to disclose any declarations of financial interests and interests affecting impartiality, and are requested to activate their microphones when addressing the meeting. So, with that, welcome. I declare the meeting open at 1 minute past 6 p.m. Item 2 is a disclaimer. The City of South Perth disclaims any liability for any loss arising from any person or body relying on any statement, discussion, recommendation or decision made during this meeting. Item 3 is announcements from the presiding member. So that's me. And I'll start with a little bit of housekeeping. For some reason, the Water Corporation has temporarily disconnected the water to this building at the moment. So I'm going to ask that if people need to make a comfort stop, if they wouldn't mind going next door to the library and using the facilities there, that would be very much appreciated. Or the park across the road, apparently. Very good. So that would be appreciated. I'd also like to announce that former City of South Perth councillor Carl Celadon has resigned as a councillor, effective as of 12 noon, Monday, 12 December. I understand that Mr. Celadon and his family moved house yesterday and now reside outside of the city district. On behalf of the City of South Perth, I would very much like to thank Mr. Celadon for his years of service to the city and its people. In addition to his duties as a councillor, Mr. Celadon has served the city in a number of other roles, including as chair of the former Property Committee, as a member of the Audit, Risk and Governance Committee, as a delegate to the South East Metropolitan Zone of Walga, as a deputy delegate to the Rivers Regional Council, and as a delegate to the Metro Inner South Joint Development Assessment Panel. Speaking in my personal capacity, I very much appreciated Mr. Celadon's diligence, judgment, and his commitment to this city. His reasoned voice and his contribution to the good governance of this city will very much be missed. Could everyone please join me in thanking Mr. Celadon? We now move on to item 4, which is attendance. Item 4.1 is apologies, of which there are nil this evening. Item 4.2 is approved leaves of absence, and Councillor Andre Brendera-Brandis has an approved leave of absence for the period of 5 December 2022 to 31 December 2022 inclusive, and Councillor Mary Choi has an approved leave of absence for the period of 8 December 2022 to 18 December 2022 inclusive. Item 5 is declarations of interest. I've got a few to read here, so bear with me. The first is an impartiality interest from me, Mayor Greg Milner, in item 12.1, as I'm a co-patron of the Wasps Hockey Club. Councillor Glenn Cridland has declared an impartiality interest in item 12.1, as my children have played hockey for the Wasps Hockey Club, and the proposed hockey facility site is where I walk my dog each day. Councillor Stephen Russell has declared an impartiality interest in item 12.1, as my daughter has been and may be a future junior member of the Wasps Hockey Club. I've declared an impartiality interest in item 15.1.1, as I've participated in discussions regarding this matter. Councillor Stephen Russell has declared an impartiality interest in item 15.1.1 as an action undertaken by myself post the item first being presented to Council lends itself to an apprehended impartiality. I think I've also declared here it is, underneath my file. A series of impartiality interests from Councillor Jennifer Navard in items 15.1.1, 15.1.2 and 15.1.3 They're all impartiality interests on the grounds that parties are known to me. Councillors, are there any other interests or declarations that people... Councillor Manolis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd also like to declare an impartiality in 15.1, 15.2, 15.3.
I presume you mean 15.1.1, 15.1.2 and 15.1.3?
Yes.
Yes. That's an impartiality interest on the grounds that the parties are known to you?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. We've recorded that, Governance. Thank you. Councillors, does anyone else have any declarations that they wish to make this evening? That's a no. Okay, moving on. Item 6 is public question time, and item 6.1 is responses to previous questions taken on notice. There's nil this evening. Item 6.2 is public question time itself. So I now open public question time at 6 minutes past 6 p.m. We have received 10 written submissions prior to tonight's meeting, and I'd like to start by inviting Mr. Murray Rosenberg of Como, if you'd like to come to the microphone, and we look forward to your questions.
Good evening, Mr Mayor and councillors. Perhaps I'll read this a little bit fast because I realise lots of questions to be, right, give other people the opportunity to ask the questions. My questions have to do with item 12.1. This relates to the notice of motion raised by Councillor Russell concerning the feasibility report for the proposed WASP hockey facilities at Collier Reserve. The agenda item refers to a number of policies and legislation that are relevant to this report. The City received the feasibility study on the 17th of the 11th, 22. Hockey WA announced on the 2nd of December 2022 that the hockey facility at Curtin will be transformed into a 135 million world-class hockey centre with 3 international hockey pitches. The proposed WASP hockey pitch at Collier Reserve would be located only 1 kilometre from Curtin. Question 1. Will this study be made available to the public to view, and if so, when?
Thank you for the question. Mr. Gibbons.
Good evening. Thank you for your question, Mr. Rosenberg. The feasibility study for the proposed establishment of hockey facilities at Collier Reserve was provided to the City on the 17th of November 2022. At this stage, the City has not had sufficient time to review the content and plans to review the feasibility study in the coming months. After the City has had an opportunity to review the report content, it will be able to determine the next steps. Thank you.
Question 2. Will the following policies and plan be considered when reviewing the feasibility study? P103, stakeholder engagement. P301, community engagement in planning. The WA Planning Commission, DC Policy 5.3, use of land reserve for parks and recreation and regional and open space. The proposed high density near Curtin University in the area, which is referred to in the draft local plan Scheme 7, City of South Perth, as the Bentley Curtin Specialised Activity Centre Plan.
Thank you. Mr. Gibbons.
Thank you again, Mr. Rosenberg. The City will actually consider a range of associated information in reviewing the feasibility study, including relevant internal and external documents, policies and plans, as you have stated. Thank you.
The last question, question 3. Will the City take into consideration whether there is a justified need to have 4 synthetic hockey pitches in the same area when it assesses the report?
Thank you. Mr. Gibbons.
Thank you, through the Chair. Yes, the City will consider all relevant information when it assesses the feasibility study and will make its decision accordingly. Thank you very much, Mr. Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbons, and thank you, Mr. Rosenberg. I'd now like to invite Mrs. Jane Morrissey of Como, if you'd like to come to the microphone, and we look forward to your questions.
Good evening, everyone. Okay, traffic volume and speed in Ryrie Avenue, Como. This is the follow-up. My submission to public question time for this meeting obviously prompted an email response from Mr. Jansen, which I received yesterday afternoon. Therefore, most of my questions have been answered. So there's only one question. Do you still intend to put a temporary electronic speed signage in the area to try and re-educate our road users?
Thank you for your question. Ms Ambrino?
Yeah, thank you for your question. Through you, Mr. Mayor, the city typically reviews temporary electronic speed sign locations once a year. Along with all the other locations, this location will be considered in the next 6 months for implementation early next financial year.
Lovely, thank you.
Thank you, Ms Imprimo, and thank you very much for your question. I'd now like to invite Ms Kathy Lees of South Perth. If you'd like to come to the microphone, welcome, and we look forward to your questions.
Good evening, Mayor, councillors, CEO and administration. This question is asked on behalf of the South Perth Tree Canopy Advocates. At the council meeting on the 28th of June 2022, an additional $50,000 of expenditure was allocated in the council's budget to the parks operations exclusively for the growing and planting of new trees. My question is, for the visibility of our members, can the city please provide specific details on how this $50,000 has been allocated, how many additional trees will be planted, and if any or all of this has been expended to date?
Thank you very much. Ms Amprimo.
Yep, thank you for that question. The $50,000 has been added to the existing tree maintenance budget in the current financial year. During April and May of 2023, a total of 170 trees are planned to be planted from the combined funds. And for the cost of planting and establishing the tree on average is $460 per tree. But as you can understand, the additional cost for the trees won't be all incurred in the one financial year, so that $50,000 has been amalgamated with the whole budget.
So 170 trees, sorry?
In total from the existing budget and the $50,000 added to it.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Ms Amprimo, and thank you very much, Ms Lees, for your question. I'd now like to invite Mr George Watts of Karrawara. Welcome. If you'd like to come to the microphone, we look forward to your questions.
Good evening all. So my first question is motion 12.1 of the November 22nd Ordinary Council meeting, included the following amendment. Identify by estimate if necessary the expenditure in 1 immediately above that relates to works done and redone and additional services, including additional workshops, retendering, communication with tenderers and the state and Commonwealth governments, provided as a result of delays in progressing the RAF as a result of council decisions. So my question is, will the costs of the delays in addressing the George Burnett Park Master Plan, including the yearly cost of the City of South Perth of operating the George Burnett Leisure Centre, understood to be in the order of $200,000 a year, be included in these delay costs?
Thank you. Mr Adams?
Thank you for the question. We'll attempt to provide a response that captures all the relevant costs and presents them in a manner that's open and transparent and inclusive of any assumptions made.
Thank you. So second question, on the 16th November and 24th November, there were 2 workshops, both titled Councillor Roles and Responsibilities Workshop. Similarly, there was a workshop on the 5th December 2022 titled Governance Matters, which appears to have been run by the Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries. Can the reasons for and content of these workshops be provided to the community?
Thank you for the question. Mr Adams?
Yeah, so we run a continuing professional development program for our elected members, and we run various sessions throughout the year. These workshops were designed to reiterate the various roles and responsibilities of elected members and give elected members the opportunity to clarify any relevant issues. There was also some discussion regarding the proposed changes to relevant legislation and regulations and the impact they may have on councillor and administrative roles.
Thank you. So third question, the minutes of the special electors meeting held on 8th of November 2022 are listed on the agenda tonight. During the SEM, there were multiple questions that were taken on notice by councillors. When will the answers to these questions taken on notice be answered?
Thank you. Mr Adams?
So given the questions were
asked directly to elected members. The city doesn't have any power to require a response from individual elected members to questions taken on notice, and that's specific to electors' meetings. It may be more appropriate for you to follow up with individual councillors.
Thank you, Mr Adams, and thank you, Mr Watts, for your questions.
Thank you.
I'd now like to invite Ms Tracy Destry of Manning. If you'd like to come to the microphone, welcome, and we look forward to your questions.
Good evening, Mr Mayor, councillors, CEO and administration. At item 10.5.2 in the draft annual report of the agenda, the CEO report states, and I quote, in part, trees are a vital part of the city's urban forest strategy, and with many trees being lost to development, the planting of over 1,000 trees this year helps us to maintain, my emphasis, a healthy urban forest for our community. According to the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage, in 2020, the City of South Perth was cited as having only 17% tree canopy and a mere 6% on its roads and reserves and 15% in its parks. The draft annual report cites that there are 23,205 street trees within the city, with only 176 of these identified as significant trees. 2 weeks ago, an estimated 40-year-old healthy, mature river red gum tree, registration number 30166, and as entered on the City of South Perth Tree Register as being over 10 metres high in 2002, was removed by the city from the Karrawara Greenways Park area. The tree was not identified as a significant tree by the city, and it was not the only tree removed at the time. Question 1. The city's significant tree register relies on residents submitting nominations to the city for consideration. I submitted 3 such applications on the 28th of June 2022, and I'm still waiting a reply. Does the city have sufficient internal resources to process these applications in a timely manner?
Thank you for the question. Ms Amprima?
Whilst the city has, whilst the significant tree register has existed for many years, it's only since 2018 that there's been more active use of the register since it was originally created. Since this time, no additional resources have been added to develop the supporting processes and management practices or to support the addition of new trees to the register.
Thank you. And your second question?
Sorry, is that a yes?
Ms Amprima?
The answer to the question is we have had, since the tree register has been more actively used, we have no additional resources.
No additional resources?
No additional resources.
Okay, so no, thank you. Question 2. If tree 30166 had met the significant tree criteria as determined by the city, would it have been removed?
Ms Amprima?
So the city always considers seriously the removal of any tree, and in this instance, the tree being on the significant tree register or not wouldn't have influenced the decision making.
And your final question?
Question 3. Will the city consider other innovative technical solutions to building the significant tree register numbers that could assist in providing protection for trees that it owns and maintains on behalf of the residents and ratepayers, and helps build, to contribute to building the city's urban forest as cited by the CEO?
Thank you. Ms Amprima?
The city's current position is to look at as many options as possible to retain trees, and it will continue to do so.
Thank you, Ms Amprima, and thank you, Ms Destry, for your questions.
Thank you.
I'd now like to invite Mr Paul Tons of Kensington. Welcome. If you'd like to come to the microphone, we look forward. He's running late. All right, if he's here by the time we get to the end, I'll allow that. Otherwise, we'll take the questions on notice. Is Mr Narelle Tons of Kensington here? Welcome. If you'd like to come to the microphone, we look forward to your questions. Just before you begin, though, I'm conscious that we're about to run out of time for public question time. I'll move a motion that we extend the time for public question time. Councillor Cridland has seconded that. Thank you. Councillors, please cast your votes. And that was unanimous. Thank you, councillors, and please proceed, Ms Dons.
Hello, good evening, Greg, Mayor and councillors. My questions are regarding 8 Kennard Street, Kensington, which is a Department of Communities house that has been demolished. And I have questions about the development application that they may or may not have given to you. My first question is, under which section of which Act is this development application exempt from council approval?
Thank you. Mr Giddens?
From the plans I've seen, the
Oops,
proposal...
hold on. I might just let Mr Giddens answer that question for you.
Sorry,
That's all right. Thank you for the question, Ms Tons, and through the chair. As a public work, the development is exempt from the requirement for development approval under the provisions of the Town Planning and Development Act. However, the Department of Communities is required to consult with the city under sections 6.2 and 6.3 of the Planning and Development Act 2005 in its consideration for approval under the Metropolitan Region scheme. So, yes, they were meant to consult with us.
Thank you, Mr Giddens. Your second question, Ms Tons?
The City of South Perth defines a single bedroom dwelling as a dwelling that contains a living room and no more than one other habitable room that is capable of use as a bedroom and may form a single house group dwelling or multiple dwellings. This development has, there's only one habitable room that is capable to be used as a bedroom. It says that the plans show that there's a study and number 2 bedroom, so it is not actually a single bedroom dwelling. My question is, will the council ensure that these 2 bedroom dwellings that are to be built at number 8 Kennard Street, Kensington, as they do not comply with the town planning scheme or the R codes?
Thank you. Mr Giddens?
Yes, thank you very much, through the chair. The council does not have any control over the development at 8 Kennard Street as it is classified as public works, and I explained that in my earlier question answer to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Giddens. Your third question, Ms Dons?
That's it for now, thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'd now like to invite Mr Jeff Dufresne of Kensington. Welcome. If you'd like to come to the microphone, we look forward to your questions.
Good evening. I'll try not to come back like I did before. This is also in respect to number 8 Kennard Street. Is the council aware that in 1998 the then State Housing Commission made an application to rezone this property and other properties in Kensington from R15 to R30? And I think this was, I've stated 110, but it may have been 109. And
Is that the question?
No, that was just a preamble. Sorry, I've got it stuffed up. Is the council aware in the submissions for that amendment of the 382 submissions, 374 were against the proposal?
Thank you for the question. Mr Giddens?
Thank you, and through the chair, I'm unable to comment on behalf of council regarding this question.
I guess if they weren't before, they are now, though. Would you like to ask your second question?
Well, you could always look it up. It's only 20 years ago. Well, it does highlight Kensington residents were...
I've got to get you to proceed with the question, Mr Dufresne. The deputations aren't tonight.
Yeah, that's right. Does the council agree that the current proposal is effectively changing the coding from R15 to R30 by stealth?
Thank you for the question. Mr Giddens?
Again, thank you through the chair. Unfortunately, I'm unable to comment on behalf of the council regarding this question.
Don't see why not, but not to worry.
Well, Mr Giddens is part of the city administration, Mr Dufresne. Council is the elected members, but thank you for your questions, and I'm sure everyone's taken notice of the concerns.
Yeah, no problems. Thanks.
All right. I'd now like to invite Mr. John Iliff of Kensington. If you'd like to come to the microphone, welcome, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and the rest of the chamber. My question is in relation to the development at 8 Kennard Street as well. Is the council aware of any proposal to change the boundaries between number 6 and number 8 Kensington, number 6 and 8 Kennard Street in Kensington?
Thank you. Mr. Giddens?
Thank you for the question. Through the chair. A survey strata application was submitted to the WAPC by the Department of Communities back in 2018 and approved by the WAPC in September of that same year, 2018. I cannot comment whether the council at that time was aware of this application.
Mr. Iliff, just before you continue, in your questions you're asking whether council's aware of things. Did you mean councillors and the elected members, or the city as in the City of South Perth generally?
The City of South Perth.
I thought that might be the case. If you'd like to ask your second question.
Thank you. If the council does become aware, or the City of South Perth becomes aware of any application to change the boundaries within the council, will they be informing the residents of 1 to 30 Kennard Street?
Thank you. Mr. Giddens?
Yes, thank you, and through the chair. The city is a referral body in relation to applications for subdivision and survey strata, and do not consult residents in regard to these applications, which are assessed and determined wholly by the DPLH and the WAPC, that being the West Australian Planning Commission and the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Giddens. And your third question, Mr. Iliff?
As per clause 5.5.3.3, is there a demand for single bedroom accommodation in Kensington recognised within the local housing strategy or framework?
Thank you. Mr. Giddens?
Yes, through the chair. Actually, yes, the city's local planning strategy has identified that there is an underrepresentation of one-bedroom dwellings in the city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just before you go, it says Mr. Iliff in my run sheet, but I seem to recall from the email that you sent me, it's a Dr. Iliff, isn't it?
Correct, Mr. Chair.
I do apologise. Dr. Iliff. Thank you very much for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chamber.
All right. I'd now like to invite Ms. Cecilia Brooke of South Perth. Welcome. If you'd like to come to the microphone, we look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors and city staff. My preamble. 2 local media outlets, WA Today newspaper and Perth Now, have named 5 of our councillors as having cold feet, as well as inferring that the community has lost trust in council due to these 5 councillors voting against appointing a project manager for the RAF. Question 1. Has council or the city provided or released any media statement supporting the processes undertaken by council and our councillors when deciding on this very important RAF project?
Thank you. Mr. Adams?
So the city does not comment on the actions of council or individual councillors. The city advises the community about outcomes of council meetings through publication of the minutes on the city's website, or by issuing a statement such as the statement that was made recently about council reaffirming its commitment to the RAF project.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Your second question, Ms. Brooke?
Thank you. My next 2 questions relate to agenda item 12.1, notice of motion. Councillor Stephen Russell, Wesley College and Wesley South Perth Wasp Hockey Club feasibility study for proposed hockey facilities at Collier Reserve. Preamble. The WA government have announced that a $135 million proposal from the McGowan government and Hockey WA has been successful, and that Hockey WA's existing facility at Curtin University will now be transformed into a world-class, purpose-built Australian hockey centre with 3 international hockey pitches, a specialist goalkeeping training facility, an indoor hockey centre with an extensive recovery gym and supporting facilities. Question 2. Will this feasibility study now include what the ramifications are of the new state hockey centre on the proposed relocation of the Wasp Hockey Club to Collier Reserve?
Thank you. Mr. Giddens?
Thank you for the question, Ms. Brooks. Through the chair. The city is aware of the recent state government announcement for the $135 million world-class high-performance hockey centre to be constructed at the nearby Perth Hockey Stadium, comprising 3 pitches, a specialist training facility and indoor hockey centre. The City has also recently been in contact with the Wasp Hockey Club to seek written feedback about the impact of the state government announcement on the proposed relocation of the Wasp Hockey Club to Collier Reserve. Once a formal response is received from the club, it will form part of the City's overall review of that proposal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Giddens. Ms Brooke, your final question?
Question 3, will the new RAF business case also address the ramifications that the new State Hockey Centre will have on the $2 to $3 million financial investment promised by Curtin University?
Thank you. Mr Adams?
So the city recently met with Curtin University to discuss the RAF project, and these discussions are ongoing. With a focus on community sport and encouraging participation in physical activity, the RAF is complementary to the Australian Hockey Centre. The RAF also offers lifestyle appeal to Curtin University students and staff and Australian hockey athletes, as it provides recreational options such as the technology driving range, food and beverage options, plus indoor aquatics.
Thank you, Mr Adams, and thank you, Ms Brooke, for your questions.
Mr Mayor.
Now, I'll come back to Mr Paul Tons of Kensington. Is Mr Tons here? No, okay. In that case, we'll take those questions on notice. I'll now just check to see whether there's been any late questions received in the tray. No, there hasn't. Okay. In that case, I'll close public question time at 6:31 p.m. That brings us to item 7 of the agenda, which is confirmation of minutes and notes. Item 7.1 is the minutes, and item 7.1.1 is the ordinary council meeting held 22 November 2022. So I'm looking for a mover, please, to move that the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held 22 November 2022 be taken as read and confirmed as a true and correct record. Anyone to move that? Councillor Manolis, thank you. Anyone to second? Councillor Cridland, thank you. Councillors, please cast your votes. And that was unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Item 7.2 is notes of briefing. Item 7.2.1 is, well, I'm looking for a mover to note that council notes the following council briefings and workshops were held. That's 7.2.1, council agenda briefing, 6 December 2022, and 7.2.2, concept briefings and workshops. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Manolis, thank you. A seconder? Councillor Cridland, thank you. Councillors, please cast your votes. And that was unanimous. Thank you, councillors. That brings us to item 8, which is presentations. Item 8.1 is petitions. The city has received the following 3 petitions. 8.1.1 is LPS 7, preservation of large trees over 8 metres in height on private property, with 77 verified signatures and an additional 32 unverified signatures, which were received today. Item 8.1.2, proposed LPS 7, areas 4 and 7, with 356 unverified signatures. And item 8.1.3, requested amendment to draft LPS 7 Canning Highway places 3, 4 and 5, with 141 unverified signatures. So I'm going to call for someone to move that council notes the following petitions will be forwarded to the relevant director for consideration as per clause 6.9 subclause 2 of the City of South Perth Standing Orders Local Law. That's LPS 7, preservation of large trees over 8 metres in height on private property, proposed LPS 7, areas 4 and 7, and requested amendment to draft LPS 7, Canning Highway, places 3, 4 and 5. Thank you for moving that, Councillor Cridland. Councillor D'Souza seconding, thank you. Councillors, please cast your votes. And I'm just waiting on one more vote. That was unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Moving on to item 8.2, which is gifts or awards presented to council. There's nil for this evening. And item 8.3 is deputations. And deputations were heard at the council agenda briefing held 6 December 2022. That brings us to item 9, which is method of dealing with agenda business. I wish to advise that the following agenda items are new reports and were not presented to the Council agenda briefing held 6 December 2022. And those items are item 10.1.1, response to Councillor Mary Choi, notice of motion. Item 10.4.2, monthly financial statements, November 2022. Item 14, extraordinary election, Como Ward. Item 15.1.1, Councillor Code of Conduct, Matter 1. Item 15.1.2, Councillor Code of Conduct, Matter 2. And item 15.1.3, Councillor Code of Conduct, Matter 3. I'll now seek confirmation from the Chief Executive Officer, Mr Mike Bradford, that all the report items contained in tonight's agenda, with the exception of those just listed, were discussed at the December Council agenda briefing.
Mr Mayor, with the exception of the 6 items that you just listed, all other items were discussed at the December Council agenda briefing.
Thank you very much, Mr Bradford. So, with the exception of those items to be withdrawn for discussion, reports will be adopted by exception resolution. And by this, I mean that the officer recommendation will be adopted as is, without discussion or amendment. So the following items have been withdrawn this evening. That's 10.1.1, a response to Councillor Mary Choi, notice of motion. And the reason for that is it's a new report. Item 10.4.2, monthly financial statements, November 2022. The reason for that is it's a new report. Item 10.4.3, City of South Perth Annual Report 2021 to 2022. The reason is an absolute majority is required. Councillors, any other items to be withdrawn for discussion this evening? And that's a no. So, I'll now call for a mover and a seconder to carry the following items by exception resolution. Item 10.2.1, Boat Shed Lease Cafe. Item 10.3.1, RFQ 9 of 2022, provision of waste and recycling collection services. Item 10.4.1, listing of payments, November 2022. Item 10.4.4, Wowga Best Practice Governance Review. Item 10.4.5, Electors Special Meeting, 8 November 2022. Item 10.5.1, 2021 to 2022 Annual Financial Statements, External, Audit, Interim and Financial Reports. Item 10.5.2, 2021-2022 City of South Perth Annual Financial Report. Item 10.5.3, Internal Audit Report, Collier Park Village. Item 10.5.4, Audit Register Progress Report, Quarter 1. Item 10.5.5, Council Delegation DC 703, Minor Amendments to Delegations Register and Policies. Item 10.5.6, Risk Management and Business Continuity Activity Report. And item 10.5.7, Policy P694, Fraud and Corruption Prevention. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Manolis, thank you, and seconded by Councillor Cridland, thank you. Councillors, please cast your votes. And that was unanimous. Thank you, councillors. So, those items have just been passed by exception resolution in accordance with clause 5.5 of the City of South Perth Standing Orders Local Law 2007, and the officer's recommendations have been accepted by council. So we'll now be moving on to those reports identified to be withdrawn for discussion this evening. And the first of those is, so we're moving on to item 10 now, item 10.1.1, response to Councillor Mary Choi, notice of motion. This is a new report, and we've got an officer recommendation before us. I haven't received any alternative motions or amended motions. Does anyone wish to move the officer recommendation? Councillor Cridland, thank you. Anyone to second? Councillor Russell, thank you. Councillors, is there anyone who wishes to speak against the officer recommendation this evening? That's a no. In that case, I'll use my powers under the standing orders to declare the motion carried unanimously. Thank you very much, councillors. We'll move on to the next item, which is item 10.4.2, monthly financial statements, November 2022. Once again, this is a new report. We do have an officer recommendation before us. Councillors, does anyone wish to move the officer recommendation? I guess I will. Anyone to second? Councillor Cridland, thank you. Councillors, does anyone wish to speak against the officer recommendation this evening? That's a no? Okay, in that case, I'll declare the motion carried unanimously and we'll move on to the next item. Item 10.4.3, which is the City of South Perth Annual Report 2021 to 2022. An absolute majority is required in this instance. Does anyone wish to move the officer recommendation? Councillor D'Souza, thank you. Anyone to second? Oh, Councillor Russell, thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against the officer recommendation? That's a no. In that case, I'll use my powers under the standing orders to declare the motion carried and, well, by an absolute majority as required. Councillor Russell.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Aren't you supposed to give the opportunity to the mover and to the seconder to speak to the item?
The standing orders say that after it's been moved and seconded, which has been happened, if no one wishes to speak against it, and no one did wish to speak against it, I can declare the motion carried. So that's what I've done. So in that case, moving on. That was quick, we're at item 11, which is applications for a leave of absence. Does anyone have a leave of absence application that they would like to submit? Councillor Navard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I would like to apply for leave from the 26th of December to the 5th of January and from the 24th of January to the 10th of February, please.
All right, and is that inclusive?
Yes.
All right.
Please.
Does anyone else wish to submit a leave of absence application? Councillor Cridland.
I might as well ask for one in a period when we hopefully won't have any council meetings. Can I have a leave of absence, please, for the period 13th of January to the 28th of January? Yes, please.
Thank you. Anyone else? No. Okay. So I'm going to call for someone to move a notice of motion that the following leave of absence applications be approved. So that's Councillor Jennifer Navard for the period of 26 December 2022 to the 5th of January 2023 inclusive. From Councillor Jennifer Navard for the period of 24 January 2023 to 10 February 2023 inclusive. And from Councillor Glenn Cridland for the period of 13 January 2023 to 28 January 2023 inclusive. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor D'Souza, thank you. A seconder? Councillor Manolis, thank you. Councillors, please cast your votes. That was unanimous, thank you. So we now move on to item 12 of the agenda, which is motions of which previous notice has been given. We have item 12.1, which is a notice of motion from Councillor Stephen Russell entitled Wesley College and Wesley South Perth, WASP, Hockey Club Feasibility Study for proposed hockey facilities at Collier Reserve. I do note that there's a suggested alternative recommendation on page 61, but I have declared an interest in this item and I'll now recuse myself from the chamber and ask Deputy Mayor D'Souza to take my place as presiding member for this item. I'll just ask that when this item is concluded, someone comes and gets me, please.
Thank you, elected members. The Mayor has now left the chamber. Councillor Russell, seeing as your motion, this is your motion, would you like to move your motion first in time?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Presiding Member. I wish to move the recommended alternative motion which states that Council notes the requirements on the notice of motion have been met.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Do we have a seconder for that motion? I'll second it for the purposes of debate. Councillor Russell, please proceed with your reasons.
Quite simply, my motion has been responded to by the City and the responses are now within the public domain.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. As seconder, I have nothing further to say. Does anyone wish to speak against Councillor Russell's motion? Anyone wishes? Councillor Cridland.
I don't think this is a bad motion. I just think it's kind of bad timing. Only in respect of the fact that the $130 million hockey project that descended from the skies and the state government so recently, in my mind, makes it perhaps a little bit premature to think anything about the WASP's business plan and consideration of hockey facilities, because I imagine that has taken them as much by surprise as the city, and that perhaps we should just not do anything until the report that the city has received from the on the feasibility study from WASPs has been considered, along with the implications of that, and then perhaps we can do something like this motion after we've done that. That's just my thinking.
Thank you, Councillor Cridland. Anyone to speak in favour of Councillor Russell's motion? Anyone to speak against, or any questions or comments in general, members? None. In that case, Councillor Russell, do you wish to wind up?
Just to clarify that I actually submitted this notice of motion prior to the public statement regarding the upgrade at Curtin University. That's what it was really. I actually intended for this to come to council at the November OCM, but I missed the cut-off date, so hence that's why it's in December.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. I'll now put the item to the vote. Members, please cast your vote. And that is carried 4 votes to 1. So for clarity, what's been carried is the suggested alternative recommendation that Council notes the requirements on the notice of motion have been met, and that has been passed. I'll read the votes. In favour, myself as Chair, Councillor Manolis, Councillor Navard and Councillor Russell, and opposed, Councillor Cridland. Thank you, members. Councillor Cridland, point of order.
I'm sorry, I thought I was voting for yours, not the alternative. Have I? Okay. Well, I would just like to say there's probably few people as dumb as Glenn in the room tonight, because I thought we were voting on your original, and clearly I've got wax in my ears or I've got dough in my brains, but that's why I voted the way I did, because I misunderstood it all. Sorry, everyone.
Okay, thank you for that clarity, Councillor Cridland. Thank you, members. The item is closed and we can recall the Mayor back to the chamber.
All right. Thank you very much for taking my chair there, Councillor D'Souza. Appreciate it. And we'll now move on to item 13, which is questions from members. Item 13.1 is responses to previous questions from members taken on notice. Responses to questions from members taken on notice at the November Ordinary Council meeting can be found in the appendix of this agenda. And that brings us to item 13.2, which is questions from members. Are there any questions? Councillor Cridland.
I don't have a list of 20, you'll be happy to know. But following on from two of the presenters tonight, I just had a couple of questions. First presenter might have been Miss Lee, I can't recall her surname, I'm sorry, and I think the second one was Miss Des tree, because that struck me because she was talking about trees. And one of her questions was related to, she'd put in something in June, I think, about some trees. Do we have, and she asked, she hadn't received a response to her question or her nomination of some trees. Do we have an anticipated date when she may receive a reply?
Ms Amprimo, should I send that one to you?
So we don't, I need to follow up on what the delay is, but we essentially don't have dedicated resources to look at amending the significant tree register. So unfortunately, it's a job that gets fitted around with them running the general operations, but I'll certainly follow up and see if we can provide some kind of response.
Thank you. And my second one relates to an area that's been under consideration tonight, which is Collier Reserve, which is obviously relevant to both the RAF and the Wasps hockey feasibility study. I happened to be walking my dog down there on Sunday, and I noticed that there were more than 20 trees had been run over. They're about 3 metres tall. They've been run over along with their stakes, looking at the wheel tracks by what had been a 4-wheel drive. Terrible destruction, and reminded me of the plane tree that was chopped down next to the Mann Street jetty. But presumably that happened Saturday night, given that I saw it walking the dog on Sunday, and I noticed that the Aboriginal Landcare were trying their best to save some of the trees that weren't broken entirely. Does the city have any idea who actually ran over and broke all those trees and the stakes and the stuff that was put around the trees?
Who should I send that to, folks? Ms Amprimo?
I'm not aware of the incident, but if you want to forward some further details through to me directly, I will.
I've got
have a
some
look into
photos.
it.
I'll forward them on.
Thank you. Any further questions, Councillor Cridland?
No, that's me.
Okay, just saw you had your light on, that's all. Councillor Russell.
Thank you. I've got some questions that I'll put on notice. So, per the city's bulletin notice to council on the 19th of December, Minister Safiotti has approved modifications to the Civic Heart basement parking, or perhaps not, or anyway, element, which will necessitate the removal of 2 existing trees at the corner of Men's and Lavisher. Of the following queries. Did the Minister or the applicable department consult with the city in regard to this matter? And if so, could council and therefore by extension the community view the city's response?
Mr Giddens, can I send that one your way?
Thank you, Councillor Russell, and through the chair. The Minister did consult with the city on this particular matter. The officers advised that the city had a particular interest in the landscaping of the site, given that existing substantial trees were to be removed to accommodate the basement. However, it was the Minister's decision.
Okay, so could the city provide the updated landscape plan which indicates planting of replacement trees of comparable specimens in planter boxes?
Mr Giddens.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, Councillor Russell, the landscaping plan is available to view on the Members Hub, and I understand it was put on there the first thing this morning.
Is that open for public viewing?
Mr Giddens.
I wouldn't imagine the landscaping plan would be open for public viewing, but because it does form part of a building licence, but I would take further advice on that and come back to you.
Okay, thank you.
If I could.
Does Town Planning Scheme 6 or any planning policy for this site have provisions for deep soil areas? And if so, could the city please advise what this is and compare this to the resulting deep soil area when considering the modifications to the basement?
Mr Giddens.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair. TPS 6 Schedule 13, Development Requirement 13.2, actually requires an application for development approval to include information to demonstrate that the proposed building achieves the objectives and design criteria relating to deep soil areas, landscape design, and planting of structures under any policy or guidelines of the Commission relating to architectural design quality. At the time we did the assessment, 12% deep soil area was required, which could be reduced to 8% if existing trees were being retained. 1.9% deep soil area was proposed to be provided. Deep soil areas were indicated as being adjacent to the former police station, where it is now proposed to construct a basement area following further ministerial decisions. Thank you.
So could you actually advise what the resulting deep soil area is now?
My understanding is that the deep soil areas are very limited in that particular area, and this area was the only part. But given that the modification came through for the basement to be provided for the subsequent use that was going into the police station, that deep soil area was removed, and the planting will occur in large planter boxes, substantial size planter boxes with trees of a similar size and similar character as well. Not quite as big as the existing one, but they will eventually grow to the same size. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just a final question on this. So with these 2 trees removed, could the city advise if any trees have been retained as part of the city cart development? And if so, could the city please advise the species and size of these trees in relation to table 3.3B of SPP 7.32- the apartments R code?
Mr Gibbons.
Thank you, through the chair. No other trees have been retained as part of the development, which is clearly obvious on site as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Nevada, I thought I saw your hand go up there.
Yes, please. Thank you. I have a set of 3 linked questions with just a short introduction. Over the last 9 weeks, the City of South Perth has been featured in a number of negative publicity articles in the local commercial media. In the face of just one negative report, many public sector organisations would respond immediately to shore up public confidence in the agency by instigating their publicity disaster recovery strategy, which would include shoring up information leakages, briefing staff and the agency's board on the risks the negative publicity is having on the agency, instigating a positive publicity campaign and briefing staff and the board of the steps being undertaken to restore public confidence. In our case, this will be the City of South Perth administration and the elected members. So I have 3 questions. Does the city have a public relations disaster recovery plan in place at this time? And if so, has the mayor been made aware of it?
Thank you. Mr Bradford, can I send that your way?
Sure. I've never heard of a public relations disaster recovery plan in any agency that I've worked in.
Right.
And I've worked in several. We do have an ability to respond to media inquiries and instances where required.
Thank you. Is the mayor aware that he has been overseeing a public relations disaster for approximately 9 weeks?
Councillor Nevada, that is out of order. That is absolutely out of order. Could kindly ask your final question and please have regard to the rules governing our conduct.
Has the mayor sought an expert external advice on how he should manage negative publicity to ensure business as usual is promptly restored within the City of South Perth and public relations work can be worked directly towards restoring the city's good name and public confidence in our city?
Well, first of all, I'd like to note that I've had no prior notice of that question whatsoever, but I have a sneaking suspicion that that media outlets will report on decisions being made by council as they see fit. I think that's really the only answer I can give to that question. Does anyone else have any public questions? Councillor Russell.
Thank you. Just in regards to number 8 Kennard Street, which was the subject of a number of public questions tonight. Was the property subdivided? I'm glad to take these on notice, by the way. Was the property subdivided to allow for the second dwelling, or is the second dwelling considered as an ancillary or auxiliary dwelling as per the R codes? Indeed, if the R codes do apply.
Mr Gibbons.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Could I please take that on notice?
Sure.
Just only because there are a number of historical things that have happened in the past as well, and we'll just go back and check the records.
Okay, thank you. Will the city, and a second last question, will the city be able to issue a rates notice for the second dwelling?
I would imagine if the dwelling is rateable, yes, it would be. But again, let's take that one on notice as well, and we'll come back to you, Councillor Russell.
Any further public questions this evening, councillors? No. In that case, we'll move on to item 14, which is new business of an urgent nature introduced by decision of the meeting. So, councillors, we have before us an item of new business of an urgent nature prepared by the City Administration and concerning the extraordinary election to fill the vacancy created by the resignation of Councillor Carl Celadon. The officer report and the item was emailed to all elected members yesterday. I hope that everyone's had an opportunity to read that. So, under Standing Order 5.4, an item of this nature can be raised on a motion by the presiding member and carried by the meeting. So council would first be voting to determine whether or not we hear this item tonight. And if we decide that it can be heard, we can consider this item in the ordinary manner. So before I move a motion that this item be heard and determined tonight, I do need to consider whether this item is of such importance and urgency that it is unable to be dealt with administratively by the city and must be considered and dealt with by the council before the next council meeting. And councillors, I have considered this matter. I have taken advice from the city's governance team. I am satisfied that this item qualifies. So, with that, I'm moving a motion under Standing Order 5.4 that the urgent business item entitled Extraordinary Election Como Ward be raised for decision. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Cridland, thank you. All right, councillors, does anyone wish to speak either for or against? No? Then we'll simply put the item to the vote. And that was unanimous, thank you. For those listening via live streaming and those in the gallery, councillors just passed a motion saying that this item of urgent business, which is entitled Extraordinary Election Como Ward, will be considered this evening. Do we have the relevant item on the screens, folks? No, okay. Well, there is an officer recommendation. Just for the sake of everyone listening in, I will read it, but then I'll ask if someone wishes to move the officer recommendation. The officer recommendation is as follows: that Council 1 declare in accordance with section 420 subsection 4 of the Local Government Act 1995, the Electoral Commissioner to be responsible for the conduct of the extraordinary election for the Como Ward. 2, decide in accordance with section 4.61 subsection 2 of the Local Government Act 1995 that the method of conducting the extraordinary election will be as a postal election for the Como Ward. And 3, allocates an amount of $30,000 in the 2022-2023 budget to cover the costs of the extraordinary election. That's the officer recommendation. Does anyone wish to move the officer recommendation tonight? Councillor Cridland, thank you. A seconder? Councillor Navard, thank you. Councillor Cridland, the floor is yours.
It's important that we have a councillor for all of our wards, and Councillor Carl Celadon has done a fantastic job, but he's no longer a councillor. So we need to replace him, and given that this is December and we don't have another meeting until February, we need to make this decision tonight. and we need to run this election in accordance with the recommendation. It's the way that we have in recent times run our local government elections, and it avoids the problems encountered in other local governments of trying to run ward elections themselves, because it puts an independent person, the electoral commissioner, who is not perfect but certainly has no skin in the game and is not subject to any allegations of being partial in the process. So I ask that councillors support this allocation of money in the budget and the suggested method of running the election to fill the casual vacancy in Como ward.
Thank you, Councillor Cridland. Councillor Navard, you're the seconder. Is there anything you'd like to say?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. No, I don't think it's necessary. I think Councillor Cridland has covered it magnificently. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against the officer recommendation?
Just a question, Mr Mayor.
By all means.
So there's obviously been the local government reforms recently, which one of the reforms changed the method of election from first past the post to preferential voting. Just clarifying, when do those take effect, and will that have any implications for this item? Thank you.
Mr Adams, can I send that your way?
So it won't have any implications on this particular election, because those changes are expected to go to Parliament in the first part of next year for a decision to be made. And in any case, I think there is likely to be an optional, it is likely to be optional for councils to have the preferential voting system. Is that correct?
Ms Tucker?
Ms. Tucker?
I'm not 100% sure, because I haven't actually seen the recommendations that have come out in relation to that. So the government haven't released the concept paper in relation to the changes in the voting at this point in time. So once we do have that, obviously we'll distribute that to all councillors.
Is there a risk that, I think the election's going to happen early March, if the government release the paper, just say mid-Feb or late Feb, that we might potentially fall foul of that?
Mr Bradford?
Yeah, no, I think it's, given that it requires legislative change, I think it's exceedingly unlikely, given that the Parliament won't come back until February, that there's any, no new legislation we passed in any time that would impact this election.
Councillors, does anyone wish to speak against the officer recommendation? No? Does anyone wish to speak for the officer recommendation who hasn't already spoken? No. I'll say a few brief words. This item should be pretty straightforward. I should start by saying that I echo everything that Councillor Cridland said, including my appreciation for Councillor Celadon having served the city as well as what he did. The officer report is pretty clear that the city must hold an extraordinary election to fill the current vacancy created by Councillor Celadon's resignation. We can't legally leave that seat on council empty, so doing nothing is not an option. The residents and ratepayers of Como wards and the city district are entitled to a full complement of elected members. We should ensure that that place is filled as soon as practicable. A failure to pass this item tonight will, I think, result in a special council meeting being convened to consider exactly the same issue. So, in other words, a failure to pass this item tonight will simply result in wasted time and wasted expenditure. So, with that, I ask everyone to please support the officer recommendation. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak either for or against? No. Councillor Cridland, did you wish to wind up? Nothing further to say? In that case, we'll simply put this item to the vote. We're just waiting on one more vote. Oh, it's me. Well, there you go. All right. And that was unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Okay, so that was item 14. We now move on to item 15, for which the meeting is to be closed to the public. So, councillors, before I move a motion that this meeting be closed to the public, I'd like to thank everyone in the gallery and everyone listening via live streaming. Thank you for your attendance and participation this evening. On behalf of everyone at the City of South Perth, I'd like to wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a happy, safe and prosperous New Year. Thank you all. And with that, I'll move a motion that the meeting be closed to the public. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Sousa, thank you. Councillors, please cast your votes. And that was unanimous, thank you. We'll just wait for confirmation from governance that we are indeed offline. we're back online. And that's a yes and a yes. Okay, so for those of you who are listening via live streaming and those of you who are still in the gallery, we've just had item 15. Item 15.1.1, the officer recommendation was carried unanimously, and item 15.1.2 was deferred until next meeting. Item 15.1.3 was also deferred until next meeting. So with that, that brings us to item 16, which is closure. But once again, before I close this meeting, thank you all for your attendance and participation this evening. On behalf of the City of South Perth, I'd like to once again wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a happy and safe and prosperous New Year. I declare the meeting closed at 7:25 p.m. Thank you all and good night.